super excited. My guest today is the author of Youthjuice, which has been described as a horror or gothic fiction novel and compared to The Devil Wears Prada meets American Psycho. Please welcome author E.K. Sathue. E.K., thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to talk about this
But
book.
it's
I feel kind of also perfect for the time frame in which we live in now when it comes to media and beauty and the beauty industry and wanting to stay young and beautiful. Can you give the listeners a synopsis of the story?
Yeah, so Youthjuice follows a young woman named Sophia. She's about to turn 30. She's kind of having anxiety about that. She gets a job somewhat miraculously because she doesn't have any experience as a copywriter or like a copy editor storyteller at this really trendy beauty company called Hebe, which is named after the Greek goddess of youth. And it's based in Soho, New York City, so like a very trendy neighborhood. And the CEO founder, Tree Whitestone, is just this like very enigmatic, culty figure, a very glamorous woman. So Sophia gets really taken in by this super glamorous environment. And pretty soon after she starts working there, Tree asks her to try Youthjuice, which is a new product that they're developing. And it has very, very strong anti-aging and healing properties. In fact, Sophia has a very bad nail biting habit and it heals all her scars. And she instantly is like, what's going on with this cream? So it's all about her kind of tumbling down the rabbit hole at this bizarre company and trying to decide if she wants to be part of what they've got going on.
Ooh. Now, where did this idea come from? And did you always know that this story was going to be in the horror genre?
Yeah, so I actually worked in the beauty industry. I was a beauty
Ooh, okay.
editor at a bunch of websites, mostly Bustle. If you've heard of Bustle, I worked
Mhm.
there for several years. That was like my first job out of college. So I kind of entered this world. I never really like wore makeup, did anything except like wear sunscreen. So
Good for you. Some of us didn't start doing that every day until like very later on in
yeah,
our
my mom, that
life.
was like the one skincare advice my mom had was like wear sunscreen every day. So I was
Mhm.
doing that when I was in high school and didn't really do anything else. And suddenly I was like 24 working, around all these companies getting sent like tons of free product. All the women that I worked around were getting all these treatments and getting like Botox and stuff around our age. And I was just kind of like, whoa, I didn't know that we were supposed to be worrying about this yet.
Yeah.
And so I got very similarly to Sophia, like very sucked in, very obsessed with the beauty stuff. I loved getting like free products. And then after I kind of like left that world, I started to just feel much more conflicted about the beauty industry and the way it kind of sells insecurity to you. And I became more disturbed by the fact that I was like, in my late 20s and already kind of like fixating on like a wrinkle, quote unquote, a wrinkle on my
Uh-huh.
forehead. And so I started working on this during the pandemic when like no one was really leaving the house and I had
Good for you.
yeah, like endless time to look at my face basically. And I don't think I knew right away that it was like 100% going to be horror. Like as I worked on subsequent drafts, I definitely layered in a lot more of kind of like the body horror that you see.
Yeah.
Um, but I always had kind of a grotesque idea
Mhm.
like at the center. So I think it took me a while to commit to like the genre, but once I did, I was like, this is where it needs to be.
It's kind of a perfect mix because I feel like, otherwise it would be a beautiful, like, coming of age story, something we would all recognize and like relate to in some capacity and very, Devil Wears Prada or like Sex and the City kind of, New York vibe, right? But I love the horror aspect because I do think it takes this industry and the fascination that we all have with beauty and youth and just like spins it on its head a little bit. I kind of love that.
You.
And are you working on anything now? Have you kind of started anything? And more specifically, if you're writing something at one time, how often are you thinking about the next thing you're going to write?
Yeah, I feel like there's a period where it's all kind of about the current project, but
Hmm.
I've definitely found that like writing just kind of creates more inspiration for me.
Mm.
And so I usually have like the idea, kind of the next idea, sort of piggybacking on the
Yeah.
project. So, like right now, I've been working on a project since before Youthjuice came out. It's not
Mm.
finished. It's I probably started it like a year before Youthjuice came out. A lot of times I'll like write a draft of something and then kind of be in a lull where like I'll send it to my agent or like my partner reads my work or whatever. And then I'll get an idea and I'll kind of start playing on the next thing while I'm on a break from the current project. So it's very, overlapping
Yeah.
in that way, which I really like because I'm not actually a very fast writer, but like I
Mm.
do want to get to the point where I'm kind of publishing something fairly consistently. Like I don't necessarily see myself as like a book a year type of
Oh my gosh.
author
Yeah.
because that's really intimidating to me. But so I like having something kind of like, in a developed stage by the time a book is coming out because it also frees me up a little bit from too much attachment to like the reception of the current project. Like I have been super happy with the response to Youthjuice, but I definitely am an obsessive person and I have to like keep myself, I have to make sure that I know that my entire worth as a person and writer is not tied to the book that just came out.
I think about that all the time with authors, and I'm like, how would you? Because I imagine you obviously, every work is going to be kind of different, and you're constantly evolving and changing and growing, etc. And but like, how do you not just get? I would be. I feel like I would just look at all the reviews all the time, and I would think that would bleed into like what I write next, and it would have to be like weekly talks with my therapist about like whether or not I, worthy as a person. Like I would fall down the rabbit hole, I think.
Yeah, I definitely avoid reviews, but I am not immune to like seeing what my overall, Goodreads average is or whatever,
Mm,
like spiraling about that, even though like, does that personally affect the way I
yeah,
read? No. And I don't think it does I think there's plenty of people who don't care, or would
yeah.
never even check Goodreads, but I obsess over it for sure. So I have to kind of like be on to the next thing
Hmm.
by the time that stage is happening. So I'm kind of like, I actually am sort of in similarly, I'm in like two projects right now, one that's in a more
Wow.
developed stage and one that's like very new. And so
Oh. Now,
those
do
are,
you see yourself writing in the horror, like literary genre, or do you see yourself branching out to anything else?
I feel like, yeah, I think that I'm very, very obsessed with sort of literary horror and like weird lit. That's kind of my place, I think. I
Uh-huh.
always joke that I will sometimes try to write something that is like not sinister and then it will kind of come out sinister. Um, so I think that was kind of even what happened with Youthjuice, where I was like, oh, I'm writing all these office scenes and they're so creepy. And I'm like, oh. I think that's
Hmm.
the lens through which I look at the world a little bit. So both of these projects that I'm working on are definitely like literary horror, similar, women on the verge, women versus the void, whatever, all those terms. That's kind of my wheelhouse. I love like straight literary fiction that's more realism, but I
Uh-huh.
feel like the kind of absurdism elements and the like
Yeah.
bizarre elements are really where I find my like excitement as an artist. I also like absolutely love detective novels, but I feel like I could never write one because they're so well
Yeah.
plotted in this way that I struggle with.
Now,
So,
I want to get into some more specific questions about you as a
which is,
person. What is your definition of happiness, and what are some of the things that make you happy?
oh, that's such a nice question.
As we were talking about horror and gore and
Yeah,
etc.
exactly. I know. Weirdly, I'm like, messed up books make me so. Yeah, I feel like my definition of happiness is just like having what I need and being like with people I love and with books. Like that's just kind of the all I really need in life. And so I think that I'm pretty easy to please in that way. I will just be so delighted if I have a pile of books next to me. I literally like carry them around my house. Like my husband is always like laughing at me because we'll be like getting ready to play a game or like watch a movie and I'll bring like two 300-page books and they'll just be like next to me as like my comfort blanket.
I
So,
love that.
I'm a very
That's so
like
nice though.
home-oriented, book-oriented person. Also, I love food. Those are those are my ingredients.
All good things. Now, what is it that you do to kind of balance your stress or find balance in your life in any capacity?
I feel like all my answers are going to be like reading, but I
That's
think
okay.
reading is like my number one coping mechanism. I'm like grateful that seem to be able to read even if I'm like super stressed out. But I also do a lot of yoga because I feel like getting and take walks because like
Oh,
physical
yes.
movement, especially because I mean, I'm not super sedentary because I like make an effort to go on these really long walks and stuff every day, but like otherwise I would just be like sitting in my house staring at my computer or a book. So I think it's really important for me to move at least a little bit every day
Yeah.
because otherwise I'll just want to be like curled up in my bed all the time writing. But like
Yeah.
when I was in college, I used to write like these kind of like literary short stories about gloomy girls and people they would like date. And it just never had like the spark because it just wasn't,
Mhm.
I wasn't really using
Yeah.
the things that make me me and like make me
Mhm.
singular voice.
Yeah.
So as soon as I started introducing like weirdness into my work, I found something that like made me really excited. And I will never forget this one time in a workshop. I wrote a really surreal short story. It was like very heavy-handed, but it was basically like this couple is like breaking up and the guy is melting into a puddle of milk, like a don't cry over spilled milk type of thing. And like we're talking about it in workshop and most of the people are saying like nice things, whatever. And this one girl in my workshop got like very upset because she just like didn't get it was like very she literally cried because she was so stressed out over like why anything in my story was happening. And then I think because like everyone else was just kind of like, well, it's just a weird story. She was
Yeah.
having a really strong reaction. And I like think about that all the time because it was really jarring to me, especially because I had always been kind of like, I was a good writer in school. So all my English teachers, my writing teachers,
Mhm.
you're so talented. It was like the first time that I ever had like a weird kind of bad reaction. But then over
Yeah.
time I was like, I don't actually think that's like a bad reaction. I think that's actually a great reaction because it was such a
Yeah.
strong reaction. And like really coming to terms with I'm not going to be for everybody. My work is not going to be for
What
everybody. And
is
sometimes,
the biggest change you think you've seen in yourself over time, whether it's in your writing or just as a person?
yeah, I think I'm a lot more confident than I used to be.
Mhm.
On the same vein that we were kind of talking about.
Yeah.
But in general, I mean, I'm always battling that like inner voice that's like, should you not have not said that weird thing at a party or whatever? But I think I really started to appreciate my own like taste and I think something that makes me used to make me feel really uncomfortable is that I'm super introverted and like I'll have a burst of social energy
Yeah.
and then even if people are still at my house, still having fun, like sometimes I will just crash and kind of like need to retreat. And it's always kind of fine. It's like, I have
Mhm.
a partner, I have other friends will just kind of fill in the
Yeah.
gap. But I'm aware that sometimes if I'm just like reading in the corner when like people are at my house, it can send like a weird vibe. So I'm always kind of like being apologetic about it. But I'm also that's something that I need to be able to do. Like I need to be
Yeah.
able to sit and recharge. And one thing I think is so funny about it is like people do that with their phones all the time, but
Mhm.
like that's kind of socially acceptable. You like pull out
Yes.
paperback, people are like, what are you doing? Cool. Like
Yes.
being
Isn't
like,
that
I know a lot of authors don't really like love the promotion element, but
yeah.
I actually really do. And that's been like such a pleasant surprise. Like I'm like, I love talking about my work, connecting with
Yeah.
interviewers, other authors. Like I got so excited before I talked today because I was like looking over the questions again and I was like, I can't wait to talk about books for like
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. And I was gonna say you've like come to life during
Now,
this. And the final question that I have for you is what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail?
oh, that's such a good question. I'm all my answers are like writing theme where I'm like, I would try to write like a multi-generational family story, but I'm like, is that true?
Oh,
But maybe it is. I think, well, on the theme of like dancing, I feel like I struggle very much with doing things that I'm not perfect at, like hobby. Like I think that's part of why I don't have a ton of non-writing and related hobbies because I like
mm,
don't like doing things that are hard. Like, or that's not true. Writing is really hard, but like I don't like to feel like I'm not good at a thing.
yes.
And
I
sometimes
get that.
I daydream about going back to like recreational dance classes just because I'm like, it would be really fun to like move my body that way again. And I kind of
Yeah.
miss it. So, and I think like failure in that case really is just about if you are upset that you're not a professional dancer at age like 33, when you've had very little training in the past like 10 years. So I think it's like there's no way to fail at being an adult recreational dancer except being too hard on yourself. So
Yes.
sometimes I think about doing that where I'm like, if I could just totally let go of like, what is the perfect ballerina shape or whatever, I would love to just kind of dabble in that again.
Ike, thank you so much for being here. This has been lovely. Where can people find you?
I am most often on Instagram as my social media. So I'm just
Well,
EKCU on Instagram.